Going live.
This is The Old Show, a source of inspiration not only for cranks, aging time deniers, and fogey has-beens. It's an expression of the senior revolution, an ongoing proclamation of our refusal to quietly take our place in the grand scheme of ageism. A place where we can gently make fun of ourselves and point the finger of righteousness at everyone else. And now, here's your host, defender of the infirm, protector of the aged, and avenger of the unrepentant retiree. This is Krotchett. Welcome to the Old Show.
Yeah, hi, is this the Medicare Disadvantage program? Yeah, thanks. Medicare Disadvantage, that's you guys, right? You got the commercials on TV for open enrollment and that kind of thing. My supplemental Medicare coverage, I think it is, Medicare Disadvantage. Oh, you say it's Medicare Advantage. Well, I just had a couple of questions about it. I was just kind of wondering, you got like a number of plans. Yeah, you got a number of plans there, but they're all kind of the same, and they're all about the same price, except they're a little different. But some plans have some things, and other plans, but you take away some of the other stuff. And I was just kind of wondering why that was, why you would do that. Right, because it's a disadvantage. Yeah, you're right. So I was just wondering why. Here's a thought. Maybe you could just offer health care for whatever comes up, and come up with a price for that, and then we could figure out how we'd go about paying for it for everybody. Maybe we could do something like that, because it's really right, that's why they call it Medicare Disadvantage. Yes, because it puts the customer at a disadvantage. So the thing is, we just don't know when we have this enrollment period we have this enrollment period that I don't know if I'm getting cancer next year, so I don't know whether I need to make sure I can get that particular possible drug that I might need if I end up with cancer, versus whether I might get diabetes or have a brain tumor. I just don't know what I'm going to get, so it's really hard to plan. Right. That's why they call it Medicare Disadvantage. Right. I get that. So I just don't know why we can't just say, here's a health care plan. It covers everything. So that way everybody would be happy with it, because there would be nothing else they'd need to, ask for or need. And you could just put a price on. I don't care what the price is, because we can find ways of supplementing that, right? And actually making it an advantage. Because the way it is now, it's kind of scammy. It's kind of like a scam. I don't want to be offensive, but it sounds scary, because you've got 20 plans that basically cover all the same stuff, but not at once. Oh, it is a scam. Oh, okay. Well, it would really be great if you could just put that on the brochure. Save us all a lot of time. Thanks.
So, Larry, what do you think of the podcast so far?
Oh, it's a podcast. Oh, a podcast. When I was a boy back in the 1900s, a podcast was a method of catching killer whales.
It's time now for a Krotchett Rant.
So, does anybody know how many debit and credit cards there are in the world? Well, let me tell you. According to the website Statistica, there were 22.1 billion credit cards. Well, that's more than 3 or 4 per each person. Now, that's amazing. And does anybody remember when credit cards came into existence? That was back in the 1950s. Do you remember when we started using debit cards? That was back in the 1970s. That was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we were using debit cards. Well, somebody please tell me, why is it I'm standing in a line at a grocery store in 2021 along with 5 or 6 other people waiting for some person to write a check? What is going through their mind? And what's more, why are grocery stores even letting these people write checks? And what's more, why are banks even getting checks printed? How is that even an option? It's like we should... how is that even an option? And why do they sell pens? Why on earth are we writing anything down anymore anyway? And paper, what is the point? Do you know how much wasted paper there is just sitting around with people thinking they need paper? Everybody's got a ream of paper at home. It's absolutely unfathomable to me that you can exist without technology in the 21st century. It's the way life works. It's like if it were 1960 and you insisted on riding a horse to work. Nobody has done it for 50 years. 50 years. Can I say it again? 50 years. This is Krotchett.
Everybody has to have a first job at some point. My first job was way back in the 60s. I sat on the loading dock with Trooper Mankins. He wasn't a trooper, that was his first name. A real trooper would be the last thing this skinny kid would end up being. He was too nice, too meek. I'll say it again, he was too nice. He's the guy that would jumpstart your car, even if you didn't have one. He'd give you the shirt off his back if you really wanted this sweaty, filthy thing. We became friends when we discovered that he was now dating my ex-girlfriend. He kept asking if it was all right, which of course it was. I hadn't seen her in a year or more, and so I had no problem with it. But Trooper found it awkward. He felt guilty anyway. He made me realize why so many other people don't have any integrity. Trooper had way too much of it. It was towards the end of July, and the sun was beating down on us something fierce. Still, it was a relief to get our 15-minute lunch break and get out of that sweatshop. We sat on the loading dock, situated in the rear of the textile factory. We had a view of a small pond adjacent to an old dump, consisting of rotting pallets and 50-gallon drums. Some drums empty, others unopened, each reeking of rust and whatever chemical concoction that would 2 years later find themselves the stars of the 60 Minutes TV episode. Thanks to the swamp that tucked itself in right next to that lake, multitudes of large black water snakes sunned themselves on the barrels of industrial phlegm, while a couple of rats waited patiently at the foot of the loading dock for Trooper or me to drop some food to them. We did that most every day, and the rats were now the size of house cats and even made the 5-foot-long water snakes reconsider the necessity of being in such close proximity. Our 15-minute lunch over, and we headed back inside, we could smell the strong chemical odors coming from the dyes we were about to apply to another bolt of fabric. We worked 10 hours a day, took 2 10-minute breaks at our station, and had one 15-minute lunch break at noon. There were no other bathroom breaks. About 25 people worked in the hole, all of us for minimum wage. In those days, corporate types hadn't figured out how to get illegal immigrants to do jobs for even less money, so small-town tycoons had to make do with the second-generation Polish and French peasants that had found their way to these miserable factory jobs once the war was over and their self-respect ran out. Inside, the factory lighting was poor. Even though our jobs required us to have clear vision to distinguish the colors we needed to apply to the cloth, long tables over 100 feet in length were set up side by side for the entire width of the factory floor. Bolts of fabric were already rolled out for the next order. This would be a 4-color order. The color stained our clothes, irritated our noses, and hid in our lungs. We were screen printing our way to cancer. Employees were put in pairs, one on either side of each table. The process involved filling a print screening frame, which was much like an upside-down old-fashioned card table, minus the folding legs.
and we'd fill it 2 inches to the brim with this current color. The 2 screen printers would each take hold of the end of a wooden paddle that, when dragged across the screen frame, would produce a color pattern on the cloth below via these little pinprick-sized holes in the framed canvas screen. The process was repeated down the entire length of the table, at which point the screens would be washed and the second color added, and the process would start again. To be sure, this was monotonous work. So one day, I started singing songs out loud to pass the time. Trooper joined in immediately. We started with a Beatles song, all together now, from the Yellow Submarine album. Pretty soon all the employees at adjoining tables chimed in, and for a brief while, work almost seemed pleasant. Mr. Vanacleer was the operations manager. He bent over, much like a heron, spotting for fish. He was a tall white man with thick glasses, and lean from most angles, except for the side profile. He appeared to be hiding a basketball just below his belt, which from this description you can assume correctly that his belt was in fact up across his rib cage, some 8 inches north of where it should be. A long flat plaid tie dangled down his neck, and when it arrived at his hidden basketball in the now protruding pelvic area, it looked more like a miniature ski lift. And while we were all singing, Mr. Vanacleer quickly opened the office door and stepped onto the factory floor. With his hands on his hips, it only made him look more like a heron, since his elbows now protruded like wings, he marched over to the light switch and began flipping the lights on and off. After a few moments, the singing died down and everyone stopped what they were doing. "This stops now," Vanacleer announced in a quiet but threatening voice. "This is a place of business, not a dance hall. Now get back to work." Just as he was turning to return to the office, Mr. Deaton appeared. Mr. Deaton was the owner of the company, even taller and thinner than Vanacleer, only without the heron lurch. At 6'5", Deaton stood taller than anyone in the factory. No one knew his real age, but he could have been 80 years old, maybe 90. Now, this was only the second time I've seen him on the factory floor. But I do remember seeing him, for as long as I can remember, a tall, thin, aging man walk down the highway past my house almost every day. When he would reach the second telephone pole across from our front yard, he would turn around and make the return trip on the other side of the highway, a total distance of about 7 miles. It turned out to be Mr. Deaton, enjoying his lunchtime constitution. It turns out that he did this for more than 50 years. Deaton and Vanacleer spoke to each other as the factory came back to life. Trooper and I began applying color to the fabric again with our print screen. Just then Deaton came over to us and stood behind me. "I understand you like music." It was not a question. Deaton didn't want an answer. "I hope I don't hear any more reports of this kind of childish mischief, or you may be looking for work somewhere else. Or instead of working here, you might consider joining a band. Do you understand?" Without waiting for an answer, he turned and went back to his office. Later that day at lunch, sitting on the loading dock behind the water snakes that were squaring off with their daily ritual with the fat rats, the sky was a deep blue, the trees, animated with a light wind, rustled with the warm stream of air. "What a beautiful day," I said to no one in particular. Trooper bit into his pickle and nodded in agreement. "Too bad we have to work," he said. "We get paid what, $1.05 an hour? The real question is, would I pay $1.05 an hour to take the rest of the day off?" Trooper was opening a package of Hostess Twinkies. "It's tempting when you put it like that," he said. Before he had taken the first bite of his Twinkie, I was gone. I was 15 and decided to take Mr. Deaton's advice. I was going to start a band. That was My First Job by Gary Paul Bryant. And this is Storytime on The Old Show. Okay, it's time to play that game we like to call What the Heck Was That? That's right, it's really a simple game. We're going to play something for 15 seconds, something from the 1930s to the 70s. Could be an excerpt from a television show, could be a little bit of a song, could be a quote from a movie, a famous speech. Your job is to guess what it is. Go to our website on theoldshow.com, click the message link and tell us the correct answer, and maybe you'll win something, and maybe you won't. So let's play it right now. Here comes that sound. You're going to have 15 seconds, and that will be that. Starting now.
heck was that? If you know what that was, just go to our website at theoldshow.com, leave us an audio message. Tell us what you think it was, and if you're right, we'll send you something really cool. On the other hand, we may not do anything. You know, we're busy, we're old, we're cranky, but that's how we do it on The Old Show. Thanks for playing. What the heck was that? So, Ann, what did you think of the show?
I never thought anyone would have the gall to do a show like this.
Well, there's that music again, letting us know it's time to say goodbye for now. We want to thank our guests, our great support team and technical staff, none of whom we'll recognize or remember tomorrow. Join us again soon for another adventure of resistance aging on The Old Show. And be sure to visit us at theoldshow.com. We always want to hear from you. Some supporting audio portions of the program were made available through the Creative Commons license and provided by the Internet Archive. The Old Show is a production of Gary Ball Bryant and is available online. Thanks for stopping by. The Old Show.